tonight's story about boring history of ancient Egyptian agriculture and irrigation. Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling an astonishing piece of ancient bureaucracy carved directly into the bedrock of history. The official canal, dredging records of the Fayum Basin between 1850 and 180 BCE. Picture a wide shot of an immense, sun-drenched valley, rendered in the formal geometry of an ancient Egyptian fresco. Warm gold light streams across weathered limestone walls, illuminating thousands of side-profile figures rendered in ochre and lapis pigment under the prosperous reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat III. The vast natural oasis, known as the Fayum, was being transformed into the primary breadbasket of the Middle Kingdom. But taming the Nile's wild branches required relentless, meticulously recorded maintenance. Ton after ton of dark river silt threatened to choke the arterial feeds that nourished Lake Moeris. In this opening ledger entry, high scribes gather upon a carved limestone platform overlooking the shimmering blue channels. Armed with reed pens, grid lines, and red ink, they document the initial conditions of the waterways. Don't forget to smash that like button if you love ancient logbooks. Tonight, we analyze how royal overseers organized the monumental task of clearing the silt to keep Egypt's heartland green and thriving. A sweeping wide shot reveals the main intake channel near El Lahan, captured in the classic profile perspective of Middle Kingdom relief carvings. Flat plains of warm gold sandstone background a bustling panorama of hydraulic survey teams. Overseers hold long measuring rods marked in royal cubits, thrusting them deep into the murky sediment along the canal floor. The limestone walls of the administrative pavilion glow under the midday heat, textured with fine tool marks and painted hieroglyphic tables that catalog every fraction of a cubit lost to siltation. Scribes sit cross-legged on woven reed mats, unrolling fresh papyrus scrolls that mirror the carved stone tablets around them. They record that 5 cubits of fertile black silt have settled along a 3-itru stretch of the western branch. If left unaddressed, the autumn inundation will spill disastrously over the outer levees, bypassing the designated agricultural basins entirely. The administrative machine responds with immediate precision. Orders are dispatched downriver by fast rowing galleys, demanding labor quotas from nearby gnomes. Every stroke of the scribe's brush is preserved here like a scene frozen on a tomb wall, documenting the start of the great seasonal clearing. In this broad fresco panel, illuminated by low, warm gold light, we observe the mass mobilization of corvée labor units coming into the Fayum Basin. thousands of workers depicted in rhythmic, repeating silhouettes of red ochre against a textured limestone backdrop, assemble along the sun-baked banks. Overseers stand with raised staves, their figures enlarged in accordance with traditional artistic hierarchy to signify authority. Papyrus ledgers record the exact provenance of every worker, conscripts from the surrounding villages, skilled stonemasons, and mud brick fabricators. The administrative records detailing this phase are surprisingly granular, listing daily bread rations, beer allocations, and the specific distribution of wooden dredging scoops and braided baskets. Scribes categorize the teams into organized gangs of 50, each assigned a specific section of the silt-clogged arterial channel. The air is thick with dust, and the hum of coordinated labor as the morning sun casts long, dramatic shadows across the chalky stone landscape. Every detail of this logistical triumph is meticulously catalogued on limestone ostracan fragments, providing a rare window into the structural discipline that maintained the vast agricultural network of the Middle Kingdom. The canvas expands into a breathtaking wide shot of the active dredging operations along the central canal bed. Warm gold sunlight bathes the scene, catching the wet sheen of dark river mud lifted from the depths. Workers stand waist deep in the murky water, driving heavy timber scoops into the compacted sediment. Rendered with the elegant precision of a royal tomb relief, long lines of laborers pass heavy reed baskets filled with dripping silt up the terraced banks of the channel. Scribes stand at regular intervals along the limestone quays, their sharp styluses scratching real-time progress reports into soft clay tokens. The administrative records note that over 2,000 cubic cubits of sludge are removed every single day. The process is a masterpiece of ancient logistics. As silt is scraped from the bottom, it is immediately transported to bolster the structural integrity of neighboring flood dikes. The textured surface of the surrounding limestone cliffs reflects the radiant warmth of the desert climate, framing a scene of immense physical labor transformed into artistic harmony by the rigid order of the pharaoh's court. This dynamic panel, rendered in rich ochre, warm gold, and copper hues against a coarse limestone texture, focuses on the clever reuse of the dredged sediment. Middle Kingdom engineers did not merely discard the canal silt, they integrated it directly into agricultural infrastructure. Scribes track the transfer of mud load by load to construct massive, terraced retaining walls across the low-lying basin margins. A wide shot highlights the geometric order of the landscape. Rows of workers lay down thick layers of dark mud, woven palm frond matrices to prevent erosion, hieroglyphic annotations above the figures detail the volume of material converted into defensive levees. The records emphasize that this dual-purpose operation saved thousands of man-hours, simultaneously clearing vital waterways while securing surrounding farmland against premature flooding. Scribes adjust their ledgers with scrupulous care, recording how many acres of arable soil were reclaimed from the swampy fringe of Lake Moeris. The entire composition glows with the golden hues of late afternoon, showcasing an empire that mastered both accounting and environmental manipulation. Through unified administrative will, disaster strikes the northern sluice complex, dramatically illustrated in a wide fresco shot, characterized by jagged charcoal outlines and fiery gold light. A sudden shift in the river's subsurface current has caused a massive bank collapse, dumping hundreds of tons of loose limestone debris and wet silt back into the primary feed canal. Scribes depict the panic with structured restraint. Overseers wave arms frantically, while emergency work gangs rush to contain the breached embankment. The administrative record switches from routine reporting to crisis management. Papyrus logs from this exact day reflect rapid-fire entries scribed in urgent hieratic script, requesting immediate reinforcements from the royal garrison at Shedit. The visual texture of the carved stone wall seems to vibrate with the tension of the moment, showing workers driving palm log pilings into the churned mud to stabilize the failing sluice gate. Despite the chaotic collapse, the scribes never abandon their duties. They catalog every broken basket, every lost tool, and the exact volumetric measurement of the landslide, ensuring that financial liability and material replacement are thoroughly documented. The recovery phase is depicted in a sprawling, harmonious relief panel dominated by warm gold tones and clean limestone lines. Royal engineers, wearing pristine linen kilts, inspect the damaged sluice zone alongside high-ranking provincial administrators. The records indicate that a new, reinforced lining of mud brick masonry, combined with straw binder, was ordered to stabilize the fragile banks. Wide shots reveal massive manufacturing camps set up on the desert edge, where workers pour wet silt into wooden molds, drying thousands of bricks beneath the relentless sun. Scribes move through the drying fields, stamping finished bricks with the royal seal of Amenemhat III, and keeping tally on tall wooden tally sticks. The tabulations are exhaustive. Every 1,000 bricks produced is accounted for, alongside the precise weight of bitumen imported to seal the sluice joints. This chapter highlights the triumph of Middle Kingdom engineering resiliency through precise administrative oversight and rapid industrial response. The damaged canal was not merely restored, but upgraded to withstand even greater hydraulic pressure. The long-awaited moment arrives as the seasonal Nile flood reaches its peak, captured in a radiant wide-angle fresco brimming with warm gold and brilliant turquoise pigments. The newly dredged channels are put to the ultimate test. Gates are slowly raised by massive wooden winches, allowing the rising floodwaters to surge cleanly through the deepened canal bed without a single trace of blockage. The visual perspective spans across kilometers of engineered waterways, showing the water spreading evenly into the carefully regulated agricultural basins of the Fayum. On the stone embankments, scribes stand alongside priest astronomers, recording nilometer readings directly onto the carved limestone staircases. The administrative logs confirm a spectacular success. Water flow velocity has increased by 30%, and silt deposition along critical bends has dropped to historical lows. The golden light of the Egyptian sun reflects off the crystal clear currents, illuminating a landscape entirely reshaped by human labor and recorded with absolute precision by the pharaoh's vast administrative apparatus. With the dredging season successfully concluded, the administrative work shifts into the dark, quiet sanctuary of the Royal Archives in Shedid. A wide shot shows the interior of the treasury, where golden sunlight filters through high clerestory slits, illuminating rows of limestone shelves lined with thousands of rolled papyrus scrolls and inscribed stone tablets. Senior scribes sit in serene, cross-legged postures, meticulously copying temporary field notes onto permanent master scrolls bound for the royal capital at Ichtoy. These comparative tabulations map canal depths against final crop yield projections, forming an irreplaceable blueprint for future generations. The fine, carved texture of the stone walls around them features intricate reliefs of the harvest deity Renenutet, linking administrative efficiency directly to divine favor. Every grain ledger, every labor report, and every engineering schematic from the 1850-18 BC Canal Campaign is systematically cataloged, wrapped in linen casing, and sealed with clay scarabs, preserving this masterclass in hydraulic management for millennia to come. And that brings us to the end of tonight's historical deep dive into the engineering genius of the Middle Kingdom. Looking back across these glowing golden frescoes and textured limestone reliefs, it's clear that the survival of ancient Egypt relied just as much on the scribe's reed pen as it did on the farmer's plow, through meticulously recorded canal dredging and silt management in the Fayum Basin. Amenemhat III's administration turned potential ecological disaster into unprecedented agricultural prosperity. The wide, majestic vistas of these ancient record rooms remind us that true power lies in organization, foresight, and unyielding attention to detail. If you enjoyed this journey through 4,000-year-old papyri and stone-carved tabulations, make sure to drop a comment below. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more deep dives into forgotten archives of history. Thanks for watching tonight. Leave your thoughts on ancient engineering in the comments, and we'll catch you all in the next episode. The Bioforge smells of ozone and boiled brass. Kalen Vance pressed his thumb against the cold copper plate of the corpse's sternum, waiting for the diagnostic pulse. In the archaeology of Oak Haven, nothing truly died until its kinetic log was zeroed out by a certified auditor. Every step a citizen took, every heartbeat, was captured by the microcoils embedded in their fascia, fed back into the grid to light the upper spires. This corpse, however, was wrong. His name had been Arthur Pendleton, a third-class lathe runner from the Rust Docks. The death certificate claimed heart failure 3 nights ago. Yet, as Kalen cleared his eyes with saline drops and engaged his optic loop, the digital readout flickered with an impossibility. Arthur's kinetic coils were humming at 40 cycles per second, the frequency of a sprinter mid-stride. Is there a malfunction with the rig, auditor? Asked the morgue attendant, a pale youth named Jax, whose collar rattled with cheap pewter charms. No, Kalen said, his voice flat as shaved slate. He traced a finger along Arthur's inner forearm, where the silver microfilaments bulged purple beneath the cold skin. The man died 72 hours ago, but his left leg is still trying to run a marathon. Jax took a step back, hand instinctively going to the warding token at his neck. Ghost charge. Ghost charges are myth cooked up by grease miners to justify stealing dead batteries. Kalen growled, snapping his ledger shut. This isn't residual heat. Someone harvested his motor cortex while his heart was still beating and left the loop running. He pulled a brass stylus from his coat and jammed it directly into Arthur's radial port. The dead man's fingers snapped shut around Kalen's wrist with terrifying, bone-crushing force. Across the dark monitor mounted on the wall, a single string of corrupted code began to bleed across the screen. Resonance / UNI T-9 / active. The low-tier docks smelled of brine, burnt oil, and the sour sweat of thousands of laborers whose kinetic output barely earned them daylight privileges. Rain fell in greasy gray ribbons through the iron grating of the middeck ceiling, washing soot over Kalen's leather longcoat as he descended the spiral staircase into the sinks. He found Nix sitting on an overturned crate behind a scrap hydrofoil shop, her brass-tipped fingers darting through a tangle of twitching copper wire like a weaver at a loom. "Auditor," she spat, without looking up. "Ure loud, your boots have iron heels, and your spirit smells like ink and dry paper. I need a trace on a kinetic log," Kalen said, dropping a heavy silver coin into her lap. It was stamped with the seal of the Central Ministry, a cog wrapped in a crown of ivy. Nix caught the silver, flicking it into her cheek like a piece of hard candy. "Whose?" "Arthur Pendleton, a lathe runner." Nix stopped weaving, her artificial eye, a whirring amber lens set into brass casing, focused on him with a soft hiss. "Pendleton was processed Tuesday. I saw his flesh cart head for the incinerator myself. His body went to the incinerator. His motion didn't," Kalen replied. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice below the roar of the bilge pumps nearby. "Someone spliced his motor loop into a high-yield grid. He's running on empty, but the wire keeps pulling." Nix was silent for a long moment. She reached beneath her grease-stained smock and pulled out a cracked slate. 3 days ago, 4 men from the sinks went cold. All lathe runners, all buried with dry accounts, but the grease stock's total energy draw didn't drop by a single watt. In fact, it jumped 12%. "Someone is building an illegal battery," Kalen muttered. "Not a battery, Vance," Nix whispered, her face pale beneath the grime. "A battery stores power. This is drawing motion out of dead flesh. They aren't building a storehouse. They're building an engine." The alleyway was narrower than an iron coffin. Kalen followed the pulse reader, its brass needle twitching rhythmic pulses against the glass face. Tick-tick-paw-stick. The kinetic bleed from Arthur's phantom stride led straight toward an abandoned pumping station beneath the saltwater mains. Suddenly, the air went thick and heavy, smelling of scorched hair and copper. Kalen reached for the dampening rod at his hip, but before his fingers touched the horn handle, something struck him in the chest. It wasn't a bullet or a blade. It was a wave of pure physical kinetic momentum, the violent, phantom force of a 60-pound sledgehammer swung by an invisible arm. Kalen crashed back against the wet brick wall, his breath whistling out of his lungs in a red spray. Standing in the center of the dark corridor was a shadow, not a silhouette of light, but a distortion in the damp air, like heat rising off an iron stove. Within the distortion, glowing silver threads outlined the shape of a man going through the motions of heavy labor, lifting, swinging, throwing. Unit Minus 9, Kalen wheezed, pushing himself up. Arthur. The shadow didn't answer. It couldn't. The mind was gone, buried 3 feet under the incinerator ash, but the body's kinetic imprint had been amplified, weaponized, and left to guard the passage. The shadow pulled its right arm back. The air around it whistled as the stored kinetic energy of 10,000 dead work shifts condensed into a single physical shockwave. Kalen unslung his auditor's lantern, flipped the shutter open, and released a concentrated flare of anti-phase dampening gas. The cloud hit the ghost circuit. The phantom swung, its fist hitting the dense gas cloud with a sound like thunder. But the chemical dampener absorbed the kinetic charge, converting it into a sudden, harmless burst of steam. The shadow flickered, stretched, and snapped like a broken bowstring, leaving only the smell of melted copper wires floating in the dark. The upper spire of Oakhaven was another world entirely. Here, the air was scrubbed with pine oils, and white marble floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers, powered by the very sweat of the lower tiers. Men and women in silk tunics moved with measured, lazy grace, secure in the knowledge that their own kinetic signatures were protected by high-caste patent. Director Vane sat behind a desk crafted from a single block of polished jet. He didn't look up when Kalen stepped into the office, flanked by 2 enforcers clad in polished steel harness. Auditor Vance, Vane said smoothly, dipping a quill into gold ink. You are 3 hours behind on your shift log. The ministry does not appreciate sloppy bookkeeping. Arthur Pendleton's ledger doesn't balance, Director, Kalen said, placing the brass recording stylus onto the jet desk with a sharp clack. Vane's quill paused. A single drop of gold ink dripped onto the parchment. A third-class worker's ledger is a matters for the lower clerks, Vane said softly. Not when his ghost loop is delivering 300 foot-pounds of force into an unauthorized conduit behind the pumping mains. Kalen countered. Someone is harvesting motor reflexes from the dead. That's a high treason violation of the kinetic edicts. It turns human beings into perpetual motion slaves, even after burial. Vane laid his quill down and slowly interlaced his thin, pale fingers. Edicts are written for living men, Vance, to keep the peace, to ensure the city's heart continues to beat. Oakhaven requires 5 million foot-pounds of force every hour to keep the sky shields active. The living population is soft. They sit at desks. They write reports. They do not work the pumps as their grandfathers did, so you kill them and drain their reflexes. Kalen lowered his hand toward his dampening rod. We don't kill them, Vane corrected, his eyes cold as ice on iron. We merely ensure that their hard work outlives their frailties. Now drop your badge, auditor. Your audit is concluded. The enforcers didn't draw blades. They drew kinetic lashes, flexible silver cords that whipped through the air with a high-pitched hum, designed to strip the physical momentum right out of a man's muscles, leaving him a paralyzed heap on the floor. The first lash whistled toward Kalen's collarbone. He dropped low, sliding across the polished marble. The lash struck the edge of the jet desk, carving a jagged trench into the stone as it absorbed the desk's material density. Kalen kicked outward, his heavy iron-shod boot catching the left enforcer behind the knee. As the guard stumbled, Kalen reached up and yanked the power module from the back of the man's harness. He didn't disarm it, he shorted it. The stored kinetic energy of 300 guard patrols erupted instantly from the cracked casing. The blast threw both enforcers backward into the glass display cases lining the wall, showering the room with sparkling crystal shrapnel. Director Vane didn't flinch. He simply pressed a copper button beneath his desk. Security to Apex office. Deauthorize Auditor Vance. Terminate with prejudice. Kalen snatched his recording stylus from the desk, hurled himself through the shattered window behind the security desk, and plummeted into the dark, rain-swept chasm between the spire and the lower decks. He pulled his emergency drag chute cord 3 seconds late. The sudden shock of deceleration nearly tore his shoulders from their sockets, but the dampener coils in his leather harness caught the strain, bleeding the kinetic force off in a shower of blue sparks as he slammed into the zinc roof of the mid-tier ventilation housing deep in the belly of the city, where the sunlight never reached and the air tasted of wet rust and ancient sulfur, lay the underspire. It was here that Nyx had directed him, to a sprawling catacomb known as the Salted Vaults. Kalen pushed through a set of heavy iron pressure doors, his body bruised and bleeding from his drop from the spire. The sight inside made him stop dead in his tracks. The vault was vast, an amphitheater of black stone, suspended from the high ceiling by hundreds of thick braided copper cables, were thousands of cylindrical glass vats filled with amber fluid. In each vat suspended a human nervous system, bare, silver-plated nerve trunks and spinal columns, stripped of flesh, twitching in eerie synchronization. Every reflex, every pulse, was wired directly into a central brass column that stretched through the ceiling toward the apex tower above. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice spoke from the shadows. Iris stepped out into the faint golden glow of the vats. She was an old woman, her face a map of deep scars, her left arm entirely replaced by a heavy steam-driven piston mechanism. She held a brass wrench in her right hand like a walking stick. The ministry calls it the static choir, Iris said, looking up at the twitching silver threads above them. 10,000 former citizens, miners, dockers, weavers, blacksmiths, their minds are gone, but their bodies' muscle memories play on an endless loop. They power the director's private sky gardens while the sinks freeze every winter. They aren't just powering the gardens, Kalin said, examining the central column. Look at the pressure gauges. Vane is channeling this force into a single kinetic capacitor. He's building up a charge big enough to crack the lower city open like a nut. He wants to flush the rust docks. Iris realized, her face turning pale in the yellow glow of the nerve vats. If he discharges that much kinetic force into the lower structural piers, the entire bottom 3 tiers will shear off and drop into the sea. It clears the trash and gives him a clean slate to rebuild. Kalin stepped up to the central column, laying his palm flat against the vibrating copper plating. He felt the terrifying surge of 10,000 lives worth of stolen labor flowing upward, a silent, rushing river of mechanical agony. How long until the capacitor reaches full capacity? Kalin asked. Iris pulled a brass pocket chronometer from her apron. The Tide Festival starts tonight at midnight. The citywide energy draw peaks then. They'll use the festival's grid surge to mask the trigger pulse. Then we have 4 hours, Kalin said. He pulled his diagnostic stylus and jammed it into the main intake bus of the central column. The stylus sparked violently, the tiny glass display flashing red as it downloaded the core schematics. You can't shut it down from here, Iris warned. If you cut the power lines violently, the kinetic feedback will blow through every nerve vat at once. It'll fry every lower tier citizen currently connected to the local grid through their work coils. You'll kill tens of thousands of living people to save the city structure. Kalin looked at the twitching silver trunks above. He saw Arthur Pendleton's signature flashing on panel 9, a small, desperate pulse lingering in the dark. Then we don't cut the power, Kalin said softly. We give the choir something else to sing, to rewrite the choir's instructions. Kalin needed access to the primary distribution hub in Vault 7, located directly beneath the central foundation of the Apex Spire. It was the most heavily guarded bunker in Oakhaven, sealed with 3-foot-thick doors of tempered tungsten steel. Nix met him at the service hatch behind the furnace rooms, carrying a heavy, rusted box filled with black market destabilizers. The guards are wearing heavy shock plate, she whispered, handing him a modified dampening pistol. Your little gas tricks want work down here. They have internal rebreathers. We aren't shooting the guards, Nix, Kalen replied, fitting a heavy brass coupler onto his forearm harness. We're shooting the floor. They moved through the dark service tunnels until they stood directly above the vault entrance. Beneath them, through a heavy iron grating, 4 Apex enforcers stood guard. Their automatic rifles rested across their chest plates. Kalen didn't hesitate. He pulled the release valve on his harness, flooding his own microcoils with an illegal overcharge of raw kinetic power harvested from the scrap shop batteries. His muscles screamed in agony as the energy surged through his legs, his bones creaking under the massive pressure. He leaped downward, striking the center of the iron grate with the force of an artillery shell. The steel grate shattered into shrapnel, and Kalen slammed into the floor of Vault 7 with a deafening boom that shook the dust from the ceiling vaulting. The kinetic shockwave radiated outward through the stone floor, instantly snapping the ankles of all 4 guards and knocking them unconscious before they could raise their weapons. Inside Vault 7, the heart of the machine beat with a deafening, rhythmic thump-thump-thump. The capacitor was a massive sphere of polished brass, 20 feet across, floating in a magnetic cradle over a pool of glowing blue conductive oil. Above them, high in the tower, the bells began to chime midnight. The Tide Festival had begun. Across the city, millions of festive lights flickered on, sending a massive surge of current pulsing down through the central lines. The brass sphere began to spin, its surface glowing white-hot as it absorbed the massive kinetic load from both the living grid and the Underspire choir. It's locked. Nix yelled over the roar of the spinning sphere, her brass eye whirring wildly as she tried to bridge the terminal contacts with her copper tools. Vane set an override protocol from the Apex desk. We can't change the release vector from here. Heavy iron boots thundered down the hallway behind them. Director Vane stood in the doorway, flanked by a squad of heavy shock troopers armed with heavy repeating cannons. "You're too late, Auditor," Vane said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The charge is locked. In 60 seconds, the kinetic impulse will travel down to the sea piers. The sinks will drop into the deep water, and Oakhaven will finally be clean." Kalen looked at the spinning brass sphere, then down at his wrist, where his auditor's stylus was hooked directly into his own arm's nervous system. "You built this choir on muscle memory, Vane," Kalen shouted over the roar of the machine. "You thought the dead only knew how to obey the work rhythm. But you forgot what workers do when the shift is over." Kalen didn't try to stop the machine. He stepped forward and jammed his bare arm, wired directly to his own auditor's rig and stylus, straight into the high-voltage intake bus of the spinning brass capacitor. The pain was beyond anything he had ever known. It felt as though his flesh was being stripped away strand by strand, his blood turning to liquid lightning. But through the circuit of his own body, he didn't send a command to stop. He sent a signal of a strike call, the sudden, violent stop signal every worker in the rust docks used when a machine jammed. Through the silver threads of the 10,000 vats in the underspire, the signal echoed. Halt, 10,000 dead nerve trunks, locked for decades in an endless motion of labor, suddenly locked their joints in unison. The massive kinetic charge stored in the spinning sphere had nowhere to go. It couldn't flow down to the piers. The choir refused to pull the lever. The energy rebounded. With a blinding flash of white light, the brass sphere ruptured upward. The massive kinetic impulse traveled back up the central line, bypassing the lower tiers entirely and exploding into the apex tower high above. The white marble spires and private sky gardens of the elite shattered into fine dust under the force of 10,000 forgotten work shifts, discharging all at once. The noise faded, leaving only the sound of rain trickling through the broken ceiling of Vault 7. Director Vane sat among the rubble of the doorway, his silk robes ruined, staring in horror up at the shattered peak of his tower. The sinks remained standing, solid and quiet in the dark rain. Nix rushed over to where Kalen lay on the stone floor. His leather coat was scorched black, his eyes faint and unfocused. She grabbed his wrist. His right arm was dark. The microcoils burned out completely dead to the grid. Kalen, she whispered. Slowly, his left hand twitched. He looked up at the broken roof, where the rain was falling soft and cool against his face, free of the sky shield's hum. The ledger, Kalen gasped, a faint smile touching his lips. Check the ledger, Nix. It finally balances. Dr. Alina Vance stared at the acoustic readings, vibrating across the displays inside Oceanographic Station, Hadelminus 4. Located 6 miles below the Pacific surface in Trench 9, the facility was designed to withstand extreme atmospheric pressure. But it was not built for the signal now pulsing through its structural steel. It was a low-frequency hum, 11.4 hertz, repeating at precise 3-second intervals. Deep-sea sonar shouldn't have picked up anything organic at that depth. Yet the waveform matched the exact rhythm of a human delta wave brain pattern. Mercer, the chief engineer, tapped the glass of the hydrophone monitor, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. The drill bit hit something solid at 11,000 meters, he muttered, his voice trembling. Not basalt, Alina. It cut through 2 feet of metal before the head shattered. And then this sound started. As if in response to his words, the entire facility groaned, the thick steel floor vibrating beneath their boots. An hour later, Alina, Mercer, and acoustic specialist Keller boarded the deep-sea research submersible Tartarus. Their objective was simple: descend into the newly breached cavern beneath the trench floor and locate the source of the acoustic signal before the surface command shut down the station. The Tartarus decoupled from Hadalminas 4 with a heavy mechanical clunk, slipping into the pitch-black abyss. Outside the reinforced viewport, the ocean was devoid of life. No bioluminescent jellyfish, no amphipods, only endless, crushing ink. As they passed 10,000 meters, the temperature inside the sub plummeted. The internal heater clicked on, but it offered little warmth against the cold radiating off the thick viewport glass. Keller adjusted his headphones, wincing. "It's getting louder," he whispered, adjusting the gain dials. "It's not just traveling through the water anymore. It's coming from inside the hull." The descent became an ordeal of psychological horror. By 12,000 meters, the acoustic frequency had shifted into audible harmonics that echoed off the interior alloy walls of the sub. Mercer kept rubbing his temples, mumbling incoherent phrases, while Keller sat frozen, staring at his audio mixing board. "Do you hear that?" Mercer asked, his voice cracking. "That's my daughter. She's calling my name from outside." Alina reached over, grabbing Mercer's arm tightly. "Mercer, look at me. There is nothing outside except 11,000 pounds per square inch of water pressure. Do not look through the viewport." But Alina could hear it too. A soft, rhythmic whisper pressed directly against her eardrums, whispering secret mathematics and dead languages into her mind. The sub's sonar pinged, revealing a massive, perfectly rectangular structure resting on the seabed ahead, defying every known law of geology. The floodlights of the Tartarus pierced the abyssal darkness, illuminating an impossible sight. Standing in the bed of the trench was a colossal monolith composed of an unknown black material that seemed to swallow light itself. Its surface was carved with intricate, interlocking geometric grooves that pulsed with a faint, iridescent violet glow. The structure was wedged into a freshly torn seabed fault, right where Hadal 4's drill had breached. "That's not natural stone," Alina whispered, her breath fogging in the freezing air. "It's a structure, a monument." As the sub drew closer, the telemetry monitors began to go haywire. Navigation systems spun out of control, and the mechanical thrusters whined in protest as a localized gravitational pull pulled the Tartarus closer to the monolithic face. Alina deployed the remote observation drone from the sub's ventral bay. The camera feed flickered onto the main display, guiding the small probe toward an opening near the base of the black monument. As the drone crossed the threshold into the interior, the video feed stabilized, revealing a vast chamber lined with organic, vascular conduits fused into the black stone wall. The conduits were pulsating, pumping a dark, viscous fluid through the structure. "It's not a monument," Keller whispered, his eyes wide with horror as he leaned closer to the monitor. "It's an engine. A biological engine." Suddenly, the drone's light beam caught something suspended in the center of the chamber. Thousands of human-like skulls fused together in a spiral, their jawbones open as if suspended in a perpetual, silent scream. Without warning, the primary power generator of the Tartarus ruptured with a deafening bang. Emergency, red lighting flooded the tiny cabin as secondary systems kicked in, casting long, menacing shadows across the instruments. The main engines died, leaving the submersible drifting aimlessly toward the jagged base of the monolith. Outside, the violet light from the geometric grooves intensified, blindingly bright against the deep ocean trench. The internal temperature began dropping rapidly. 5 degrees, 3 degrees, 0 degrees. Life support is failing. Mercer screamed, grabbing the emergency ballast controls. He pulled the manual release lever, but nothing happened. The magnetic field surrounding the entity had fused the mechanical releases shut. They were trapped at the bottom of the world. The low-frequency signal was no longer just sound. It had become a physical force. The air inside the sub felt heavy, thick with static electricity. Keller stood up from his seat, his eyes completely bloodshot and pupils dilated to the edges of his irises. "It's opening the door," he croaked, unbuckling his harness. He moved toward the outer airlock control hatch with terrifying calmness. "Keller, stop." Alina yelled, lunging forward to tackle him. But Keller possessed supernatural strength. He knocked her back against the control panel, his hands reaching for the manual pressure valve that would instantly implode the sub. Mercer tackled Keller from behind, pinning him to the floor. They wrestled frantically in the dim red glare as the airlock warning klaxons blared. Outside the viewport, the monolith opened like a massive flower of obsidian skin and bone. Thick, bioluminescent tendrils reached out from the chamber, wrapping around the hull of the Tartarus. The metal squealed under immense pressure, rivets popping along the ceiling seams. Alina realized the horrifying truth. The entity beneath the ocean floor wasn't an alien vessel or an ancient ruin. It was an ancient apex parasite that had had slumbered inside Earth's mantle for millions of years. Hadal 4's drill hadn't discovered it. It had woken it up. The structure was now broadcasting its activation code through the ocean currents, using the Earth's water as a global amplifier to reach every shore across the planet. Water began spraying into the cabin from a hairline fracture along the front viewport glass. The pressure hull is failing. Mercer roared over the sound of screaming metal. Elena, get into the single-person escape pod. I'll manually blow the emergency compressed air valves from the engine bay. Elena grabbed Mercer's arm. No, you won't make it back. Mercer smiled grimly, blood trickling from his nose due to the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. One of us has to tell them what's coming up from the deep. Go. He shoved Elena into the narrow escape pod hatch and slammed the manual seal. Through the small, thick, reinforced port of the pod, Elena watched Mercer scramble into the flooding engine bay. A second later, a violent explosion knocked the pod free from the Tartarus. As Mercer blew the ballast charges, the escape pod shot upward through 6 miles of black water like a bullet, breaking the ocean surface 3 hours later into the stormy night air. The pod bobbed violently alongside the massive metal pylons of Oceanographic Station Hadalminus 4. Elena opened the hatch, gasping for breath as rain washed over her bruised face. She scrambled onto the deck platform, rushing inside the control module to call for surface extraction. But when she stepped through the door, silence greeted her. The entire crew of Hadalminus 4 was standing frozen at the main windows, staring down into the black water with wide, unblinking eyes. From their radios, from every phone and computer speaker across the station, the 11.4 hertz hum was playing loudly, broadcasting out to the global military networks and coastal cities across the globe. Thank you for listening to Story 3, The Abyssal Frequency. The ocean covers over 70% of our planet's surface, keeping secrets older than humanity itself, trapped beneath dark, unfathomable pressures. What lies at the bottom is not always dead. Sometimes it is only waiting for us to dig deep enough to wake it up. If you enjoyed this cosmic deep-sea horror audio experience, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another night terror. Leave a comment below telling us, would you brave the depths of Trench 9? Until next time, stay away from the dark water